Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm glad it's the end of the day.
Yeah, I know. I didn't realise you were a Scouser.
Well, yeah, I mean, ish. I'm from across the water, but close enough to take kind of dramatic
Mm.
offense at your picture earlier.
Yeah, I know. If anybody wants to know the context of what we're talking about, I tweeted a picture in a Man United apron earlier because I had no choice. So yeah, but I'm gonna shut up now.
It was more the comments about
Well,
Scousers at the bottom that I took the problem with rather than the Man United bit.
I think they're both equally as bad.
Okay.
So
what were you making, Parul? Anything nice?
I was prepping my Thai curry, it's like Panang for dinner. So over my
Is that going to be a
lunchtime,
treat after the space?
I've already eaten it. I've been to the gym. I was starving. So yeah, had to just make the most of that. So yeah. Have you eaten yet?
Well, I have, yes. I'm an early dinner person as well. Like it gets to like 5 p.m. and I'm like, I'm starving. I need to eat something.
Yeah, I definitely. I usually have
Well,
to have a
great.
snack.
Thank you both for joining us. We'll kind of start kick this off and kind of run it however long we run it. It's currently recording, so
Hmm.
afterwards it'll be uploaded to YouTube and edited and shared across socials and all that kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I'll just kick it off in terms of just a high level overview of what is your own experiences with kind of mental health issues. I know that this
Oh,
can be quite triggering for people, and some people don't like to talk about certain things, but feel free to share and be as
yeah.
open and honest as you like. Parallel, if you want to kick us
Hmm.
off.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Parul. I'm a senior TA at xDesign, and I've worked in recruitment for almost like 4 years now. I feel like it's aged me horribly because it is a very stressful job. So yeah, probably we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think I was misdiagnosed with depression. It turned out to be ADHD, which is funny. Well, it's not funny, but you know what I mean. I struggled with anxiety for a lot of my adult life. And also God, a few years ago now, like eating disorders as well, which I've always been like really, really open about. I speak quite candidly about mental health on LinkedIn and Twitter because I think there's still quite a lot of like stigma around it. So it's normalizing the conversation and also bringing in some of the positive changes that are just so sorely needed in the workplace. So quite passionate about that. So yeah, that's my rundown. I'll hand over to Dan now.
Yeah, so I when I was growing up, I was diagnosed with depression in teenage years, and that's never really gone away. And that's kind of stuck with me through my working life. I've been kind of an engineering leader for 15 odd years now, and for the best part of 5 years or so before that, I was a developer. Um, and actually, in more recent years, I've found anxiety coming quite to the fore as well. Anxiety is something, if I look back to when I was maybe teenager, 20, I definitely
Mm,
had bits of anxiety there, but it's definitely become much stronger as I've got a little bit older.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I would say I suffer from anxiety more than depression these days. In the workplace, I've only started being open about it really in the past few years. It's kind of tough when you're leading a team because you're told that in order to lead a team, you have to be kind of bulletproof. You have to,
mm,
one of the questions you always get
mm,
asked at interview is how do you cope with stress? So it's only in recent years I've found the self assurance to say, actually, no, these things do impact me. Doesn't
mm,
impact my ability to do my job. But yeah, I've started being open about it on LinkedIn and with my
mm,
team and generally in the past few years.
mm,
That's really refreshing to hear. It's always difficult when people aren't open about it. And I think that was definitely something that I had growing up. It was just never really talked about in my household. It was never really talked about much amongst my friends. So it was really difficult. And I kind of went through my own struggles from like 13, 14, right up until now, and I'm 27. and recently diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And I think after like all those years of struggling in silence, it was initially quite scary to kind of be diagnosed with something, but now it's more comforting. I can like pinpoint why I react certain ways to certain things, and I can make adjustments in my life to make things easier for me, make relationships better, how I communicate with people. And I think that's like a huge part of it, is just learning and understanding what it is you have and how the world, how you view things differently, how you feel things differently, and then teaching other people to then adapt to being around you as well as a person.
I mean, one thing I found for me, and I'm kind of, if you're comfortable about it, be interested to get your perspective as well, was when I was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, it actually did make a difference, even though it didn't really change what I was experiencing. It did somehow make me feel better, because not only did it allow me to go, oh, actually, this is a thing. This validates that this is a thing that I can put a label on. It also helped me explain to other people what was going on. So I'm curious, did you experience the same kind of thing when you got the formal diagnosis?
I did, yes. And I think I was able to look back on situations and conversations that I've had kind of respectively and thought, oh, well, that's why I reacted like that. Like I always grew up thinking the way that I reacted to things and how I engaged with people was just like, I always put it down to my own bad personality traits. I thought there were negative things in my life that was just who I was, and that I was just this person. But then having a diagnosis, although it was scary, it was like, oh, okay, well, I now understand why I'm like that, and it just helps. It helps me be a better person. It helps me be a better colleague, a better friend, a better girlfriend, all those kind of things, because now I understand myself better, and I can kind of take a step back and think, all right, okay, well, that's why I'm reacting that way.
Yeah. There must have been such a bit of like a light bulb moment as well. I mean, mine wasn't like mental health, but I think with ADHD, like struggling most of my life with a lot of things. And now, like, I mean, I haven't nailed the whole adulting thing, but I think I'm like the closest that I've ever been to it, because I just understand myself better, and I can get support from like my partner, my family, from work. And yeah, it's just, nothing's really changed that much. So, yeah.
Parul, how do you find that it affects you kind of on a daily basis, having ADHD, like either kind of whether it's at work or in your own personal life? What does it mean for you, and how does it impact you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll talk about sort of the sort of mental illness as like a general, so not sort of like ADHD. Um, it's for me, I really struggle with the lack of self-compassion. I found that I was harder on myself than anybody else probably would have been. As I hold myself to extremely high expectations, and then that causes me to fall into a bit of like I just end up like spiraling, because I'm like, okay, I'm like really, really struggling here. And it's just like day to day things. So let's say like having anxiety. Last week I went to Leeds with my team. And because I've got anxiety, I was very, very anxious about traveling. So taking the train, so I have to leave myself loads of time. I hate actually being on the train. There's a lot of like unknown factors that like involved there. I'm worried about, do I have enough time in between, just to have some relaxing time. I have to be around like people all day. So it's things like that for like people who feel mentally well, maybe like neurotypical people as well. As those kinds of experiences are not actually, well, they can still be like quite stressful, but not to the point that it is so like debilitating for me. So that's what it is like day to day. I think at work as well, I feared being perceived as incapable. Cause similar to like what Dan said, from being in a leadership, well, I'm not in a leadership position, but I've just started a new job like 3 months ago, and they're a brilliant company, but you don't know that until you get in there, right? So I was worried that when I start, and I was at a bad point with my mental health. Nothing to do with them. It was going on way before that, something unrelated, and I was like quite worried about talking about it openly. So you spend 40 hours of your week at work, so yeah, it can be quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having something that affects, like, and I mean, not speaking from experience, I don't really have anxiety as such, but I can imagine in certain circumstances it is really heightened. And as you said, I mean, I'm always early for everything anyway because I have a real fear of being late of things. So I can imagine it affects all different aspects like that. It's something that I would have never considered for someone with anxiety. But what do you think, Dan? Is there anything that affects you kind of on the daily basis? Are there any certain triggers that you have to deal with at work or anything like that?
Yeah, so for me, I would say the triggers are all around. I'm going to say lack of control, but I don't want control to come across as a bad word. I'm not really a controlling person, but situations in which I don't know what to expect. So situations which might actually be really triggering for some people, such as standing up in front of a huge group of people to give a presentation or that kind of thing, I'm fine with because I'm kind of in control of the situation. But social situations, after work drinks, going out for lunch with more than just a couple of colleagues, I actually find that really quite triggering. And I avoid all those situations because I don't know what's going to happen. And the anxiety for me is more about thinking about what's going to happen and my brain just spinning on maybe this will happen, maybe that will happen. But if it's a situation where I'm in control, obviously I got a pretty good idea what's going to happen. So for me at work, it is that I don't go to work drinks events. I don't go to Christmas parties. I don't go to summer parties, those kind of things. And how that can impact me is I'm worried what people will then think of me. Are they going to think I don't like them, or I'm not committed, or I'm boring, or I'm not fun, or I'm, all these other things. And so I find that quite tough. It used to be that for work Christmas parties, as soon as I found out the date, I'd book holiday so that when the official invitation went round, I could go, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm on holiday that day, I can't possibly make it. And again, it's only in the past couple of years I've had the confidence to say, actually, no, that's quite triggering for me, so I'm going to avoid doing that, but I'll see you in other situations. We will get a chance to have coffee and whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned just then, Dan, that you previously wouldn't be so open about it. And what do you think was the change in you now being open about your struggles with mental health in the workplace? Like, what was that change in the last few years that made you start being more open about it with your colleagues?
I think that partially it was just a kind of leap of faith, just one day, and this is not necessarily in a good way, but one day you're feeling so low or you're feeling so anxious that you're just like, well, things can't get any worse, so I'm just going to tell somebody. So for me, that jump wasn't always a positive thing, but what's really helped is seeing other people and hearing other people's stories. And I notice it more now in that the more open I am about my own mental health, I notice people around me being open about their own. They might not define it as anxiety with a capital A, but people being more open about things that they might not enjoy or things that might not be comfortable for them. And it was the same for me. As I saw people talking about it, there was a moment for me which sticks out. I won't embarrass him by naming him, but there was a previous manager of mine who I was talking about my mental health, and one day I was feeling really low, and he said to me, well, why don't you take a day off? And that was the first time I'd had the conversation with somebody around the fact it was okay to take time off if your mental health wasn't up to working, because until then I just got the message that actually if you're a bit stressed, as it was called, you just need to get on with the job. And I think that was a light bulb moment for me, was having a manager who says, no, if if you're too ill to work, then you're too ill to work, whether that's mental health or physical health.
I think
Yeah.
just adding to that, sorry, Alice, because I was going to mention about like taking off days for mental health, because we have like sick days, right? And like people use the sick days. I think the lines are also blurred between if you're working fully remote, right? The line is blurred from sick sick enough to take a day off, or not sick enough to like continue working. So obviously we're taking as society, we're just taking less mental health days anyway. And I think, I mean, there's a statistic I'll try and get as well. It's like most people don't state mental health as the reason for them taking a day off, when it is actually because of like mental health, because there's still a bit of a taboo about it. Like there's an inequality between what is considered, like a serious enough like illness to have to like take the day off. Like mental health is just as important as physical health. And my first sick day I took off my company, I've been here for 2 months. I was really suffering with poor sleep. So due to anxiety, so I was struggling with sleep maintenance and insomnia, which means I was waking up dead early. One particular night, I'd had the worst sleep, and it was a Sunday night. So I was really worried about, well, not worried, but I was going to need a sick day off on a Monday in a new job. And I told her, I'm really anxious. I'm not sleeping well. And I put that as my reason on the form, because like I felt comfortable enough to say I'm taking a day off on a Monday, 2 months in, for mental health. So having a workplace like that honestly just makes such a difference. Like I could have powered through, but I was like, I'm not physically unwell. I just slept so badly and I'm really anxious and I just feel on edge and I need a day off. I need a sick day. That's all I said.
Yeah, I think that's a really brave thing to be able to do and say. And I've only recently, since I've been at Haystack last year, I had a bit of a like mental breakdown, which is why I then got diagnosed with this. And I felt so bad. I was like, oh, I just dropped my phone there. That was good. I had like spoken to the crisis line, everything, got medication from my doctors and stuff, and they gave me a sick note to be off for a week, but I still felt like I needed a sick note, even though I completely knew that I could say to my managers, look, I'm having a really hard time at the moment, but that sick note made me feel like it was okay. But now having done that, now I feel much more confident in saying, look, I'm just having a hard time. Like I just need like a day in bed. I need a me day. I can't focus on work, because that's how you feel when you're in those moods. It's like you could be at work, but you're not mentally there. You're not being productive. You're not doing the things that you should be. So it's much better to take the day off and then come back feeling better the day after or the week after or whatever it is, however much you need.
Yeah, there's a really good book that I recommend on this topic, like the guilt around taking time for yourself. It's called Do Nothing by Celeste Headley. This is a brilliant book. I'm about a quarter of the way through it, and it talks about breaking away from this like culture of like overworking, burning out, and like living less as well. And honestly, I think it's changed my mindset like quite a lot. Like, why do we feel guilty? Like when you employ somebody, you take them as they are, and that person, like people are complex things. Like they're gonna have physical health conditions, they're gonna have mental health conditions, they're gonna have some days where they're feeling better than like others, and you take that person as a whole and you treat them like a human, not like a workforce. Sorry, I'm so passionate about this because I think like I've worked in like places that claim to be like supportive of like mental health, but then when like push comes to shove, it's just basically like performative activism, and they just don't actually care.
The one thing where I work now, which is I've never had anywhere else, and I think is an amazing benefit for two reasons, is we're signed up with a service called Self-Space. And it's basically free therapy and counselling. And I know that sounds like, but basically you can go onto the website, you book your therapy appointment, you find a therapist, you book your therapy appointment, and you don't pay. The company pays for it. And not only is that amazing because, just, wow, that's amazing. But also so many people, including me, are open about using it within the team. And that is an amazing culture that quite a few people will say to the team, actually, I can't do a meeting during that hour because that's when I've got my self-spaced therapy appointments. And really reducing the stigma, because there's people in all sorts of positions through the company going, yeah, I use it. Why wouldn't I? If, as it turns out, we do have free physio as well, but there'd be no shame in saying, I'm going to see a physio, and the company are paying. And somehow we've managed to bring that culture to mental health as well, where people are fine to say, yeah, I can't make stand up today because that's the only time my therapist could do.
Yeah, I think with like you being like a manager as well, I think if people like if you felt comfortable doing it, it's like putting it in your diary, and if your diary is accessible to other people. So I had therapy in my calendar. It's not during work time, but it's just as a reminder, and it was on a private appointment. And then I was like, wait, but why? And then I just changed it so it's public, so anybody who looks at my calendar can see it. It just normalizes the conversation a bit.
I had a bad experience with that, to be honest. Not at my current company, I hasten to add.
Okay.
But a little while ago, I put therapy in just to block out the time every week, so that people wouldn't overbook it.
Yeah.
And I didn't hide what it was. And actually, one of the VPs of the company reached out to me and said, you might want to hide that because I'm not sure you want people knowing you're going to therapy. And that person really thought they were helping. But what they did was just pile on a load of shame. It was like painting a coat of shame over me over it. And of course I hid the appointments, because in that moment, what else are you going to do? Because I come across on things like this as quite a confident person, but I'm actually quite a fragile person in a lot of ways. And I was just like, wow, maybe this isn't a safe space for me to admit that I see a therapist. And so I hid it and I didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
That's really sad that you had that experience.
So sad.
Yeah, it should never be like that. It should just be that. I mean, I was very lucky. My therapy appointments, I could only get booked in for like, my therapy appointments were like at 5:30 on a Tuesday or something. They used to be, and I had to say to my manager, look, I need to leave work early every Tuesday, sorry, because I need time to get there, and I'm meant to work till 5:30. And he was like, honestly, it's fine. Like you do the hours. Like we don't clock watch here. Like just you do you. Like no, like there's no questions asked. And that was really nice. And I'm very open with mental health and stuff in the workplace. And I think, as you were saying, by normalizing it, it makes it more acceptable. But I was wondering, do you think there's, obviously you mentioned that safe space, Dan, but is there anything that organizations themselves, whether it's a large organization or a smaller organization, that they can do to try and encourage positive conversations around it and normalize it?
For me, I think it's just about being visible. So, saying that we have a benefit that gives you free therapy, publicizing that, not waiting for somebody to say, oh, I have, I struggle with my mental health, maybe I need therapy, but tell everybody in the same way that you tell everybody about, free childcare. You wouldn't ask them if they have children before telling them. You just go, right, we have this benefit. So if you just say we have this benefit, and actually a lot of people use this, I think also one change I have instituted everywhere I've been where it's not been done so far, but where I'm currently it already is to explicitly state in the employee handbook that sick leave applies to mental health as well as physical health. Just make that absolutely explicit.
Yeah.
I think it's
good. You could even have like separate ones. I think some companies call them like duvet days.
Yeah.
Which I think is good.
Yeah. It's for me, it's about thinking of people as individuals and thinking about circumstances as individuals. So, one thing is, I know you were mentioning about anxiety around travel, and especially with the pandemic, that's become a thing that, people are experiencing. So some days somebody might feel well enough to work, but maybe not well enough to go and do the meetings in person in the office because their anxiety is a bit spiked and they don't, they can't quite face the train or the office environment or the whatever it is. So they might say, I'm working today, but actually I'm not able to come into the office. And we need to normalize that as well, that it's not this binary thing where somebody is either well enough to work or so unwell they can't work. Actually, some days it's somewhere in between.
Yeah. I think finding like the working arrangement that works best for you is like good, because I mean I work fully remote pretty much, because like that just works really really well for me. The things that I do for my mental health are seeing my friends after work or like going to the gym. Like it's not being in an office. So it gives me more capacity to actually like do that. But for certain people, like they just wouldn't like working from home. But like you're absolutely right. I think as an employer, you just need to give flexibility on like a day by day basis, not kind of arbitrarily force people in. Like, hey, everyone, we're going to be in on Wednesday. Like, why?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Dan, when I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago, you kind of opened my eyes to something that I hadn't really considered before. Is in the Haystack office, I'm myself and my colleague Harriet. We're very much kind of the organisers of all the social events and all that kind of thing, but a lot of that is around like big group events and around drinking in particular. And when I was speaking to you, Dan, you mentioned about how you don't attend these large events and you've had people attend them and hate them and have anxiety attacks and things like that. And I think that really opened my eyes to, well, there are certain people that don't attend these events, but there is a reason behind that people don't attend these events. It's probably very overwhelming for them. It probably induces anxiety, and then there's a knock-on negative effect. And we don't want to build that kind of culture. We want to build a culture where not everything is around big events and drinking, essentially. It should be around meaningful interactions as well.
I think it's true in a lot of places I've been, but to a certain extent, I think it's unavoidable because the kind of people who are drawn to be part of the organising of the social events tend to be people who like social events, because it's a kind of this self-fulfilling thing. So the committees of people who organise the company events tend to be the kind of people who enjoy those kind of events, because that's kind of why they are there, if that makes sense. We actually at work have an annual conference where the whole company gets to fly off to somewhere for a week, and all expenses paid for a week, do lots of events and things of an evening, and it's just like a big deal for the company. And I didn't go, and it's fine for me not to go because the company is kind of okay and understanding, but there was still amongst some people this little bit of, oh, you're not going, that's a bit weird. And when I said to some people, actually, I'm not going because that's going to be very triggering for me, the idea of being social events every night, and the alternative to a social event is room service in a hotel room on my own. And if I do feel anxious, my escape is I've got a hotel room. That's not great for me. And so many people tried to persuade me it would be okay. And I found, if you were organising a sports day and somebody said, well, I can't go to the sports day because I've broken my leg, people wouldn't say, well, why don't you come along and try running and see how it feels? And yet with mental health, if you say, I can't do that thing because people, I know it's coming from a good place. I know it's coming from a place of trying to help, but so many people do inadvertently invalidate the feelings by saying, oh, don't be silly, you'll be fine, or don't be silly, why are you worrying about that?
Yeah, it's like toxic positivity. Like people are like, oh, there's like, there's people who have it worse, like just stay positive, just give it a go, like try and get through it, without like understanding that like there's literally a chemical deficiency in my brain which is telling me no. So like that's it. So it's like it's setting effective boundaries on learning how to say no. So like I've been such a people pleaser since I was like a kid, and that comes from being part of like 3 different minority groups as well. So that was always my way of trying to make myself feel like I was like fitting in, that like people were gonna like me. But that's carried through to my adulthood, as I I struggle to set boundaries. I struggle to say no to people. No is never. No should be a complete sentence. So this goes for like friendships, relationships, family, work. And going to therapy has actually really, really helped with this. And I do appreciate that comes from a position of privilege. Not everybody can go to it, but reading more and understanding where you're struggling to set boundaries and starting to put those in place. One of my favourite phrases on this is poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine, which is like, you know, someone comes here from like work and they're like, I need you to do this by like tomorrow, and you're literally like back to back. But I'm like, I'm now with the mindset of like, I get paid for my hours. I do exceptionally well at work. I don't work a minute more than I'm paid to. Like, obviously, if it's an exceptional circumstance, then like, yeah, but I don't now. Like, I've worked hard to like be in that position, but I set that boundary very early on. I'm never online past my working hours, and I'm not going to start setting that expectation anytime soon, because then you do it once, people expect it more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm quite guilty of, if I, like, for example, this morning, like I couldn't sleep, so I was like sending a work message at 6 a.m. But I'm very much, I tell people like I do not expect replies. Like you can get messages from me at any time of the day, but then please don't open them, please don't read them until it's your working hours. If it's an emergency, it's probably a fire or a flood, and in which case I will not be contacting anyone in the marketing team, because we will not be the people to deal with it. But setting those boundaries is really difficult. In a previous life, I was a social media manager, and obviously social media is 24/7. And I remember being in the Cotswolds on like a 10-mile walk and trying to get phone signal because someone was ringing me to post this thing about an event. And I was like, why on earth am I wandering around this field trying to find signal? Like, this is not an emergency. This is not me setting boundaries.
Yeah, one thing we have where I work is we have this concept of work your way, and what that has the counterintuitive effect that people are quite often online out of what you would call working hours, because if you have somebody who's got an event at their kid's school, they might say, well, actually, I'm going to finish work at 2 today and I'll go to the kids' school and see the play or whatever. And then the kids will come home, we'll have something to eat, and I'll pop online and finish that bit of code I was writing before bedtime or whatever. But you're right in what you said, that we always say there's no expectation to reply. So if you get a message from me on a Sunday, doesn't mean anybody else is just expected to work of a Sunday. It just so happens that for that week, it worked better for me to do that little bit of time on a Sunday. And on the subject of no, I remember
that's quite hard though, because I think.
Go on.
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, like, I think if I was getting messages from my manager at like random times, even though they've said, oh, I might work like weird hours, I don't know, I feel like sometimes it can cause a bit of like an unconscious message that maybe I should be working like a little bit more. I don't know how I feel about it.
So I had a very interesting feedback. Within my team, we're very open about feedback, and some people are very, very open about feedback, and it's great. And I had COVID a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And one day I was kind of a bit brain foggy, but not that bad. So I sent a message to the team to say, look, I've still got COVID, probably not going to be online today, and booked the day off sick. And then by the afternoon, I was kind of feeling a bit better. So I was bored, to be honest. So I wandered and started sending a few emails and whatever, not because I had to, but just because I wanted something to do. And one of my team actually messaged me and said, you're setting the example to work on days when you're sick. Please don't do that. So I actually sent a follow-up message to the team which said, I know I'm off sick. I'm only here and working because I'm bored. Don't ever take the expectation that you need to work on a sick day. And I completely take the point. I'm not in no way a hierarchical manager, but no matter how hard I try, when I'm in a meeting or when I say something, it carries different weight to other people in the team. And I really don't like that fact. But you're right. If somebody's manager sends an email, no matter how democratic and flat the team is, I think I have to work really much harder to say, no, absolutely, it's fine. You don't need to reply until you're working again. And I do actually sometimes call people out on it. You know, if somebody replies to a Slack message of an evening, I do actually say to them, what are you doing online? You know, in a joking way, but to kind of send the, I'm not expecting this now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think having those, I agree with you, Parul. Like, it can be difficult because I was definitely like that at one stage, like with certain managers. But now, especially the team that I work in, like the CEO, he has young kids, so he's often up early in the morning and late at night, as Dan said, like working around what kind of works for him. Leaves early to pick the kids up. Like, that's all completely acceptable.
Yeah.
But it is just making sure you have that like firm conversation with the team and saying, look, I work like this. That does not mean that you have to work like this. Because I quite enjoy a Sunday evening where I spend an hour going through my emails and stuff and preparing for the week ahead, just so that I make my Monday mornings more zen, rather than it being like, oh my God, I need to catch up on all these things, because I hate starting a Monday like that. But I absolutely never expect anyone else in the team to be doing that. But it can be really difficult to set those kind of effective boundaries. But absolutely, like, if that's something that, as Dan said, like if that works for you, then I absolutely applaud that. Like, I'm very much, when I go on holiday, I will delete Gmail and Slack and everything from my phone. I'll delete LinkedIn. And I'm like, look, you guys have got my mobile number if there's an emergency. But in my head, I've got this TikTok going around that's like, it's not an emergency, we work in marketing. There is no real emergency that we ever really need to deal with. But I guess there's also a difference between seeing people in the office regularly and working remotely, and how you build that conversation, how you work that into your structures. So Dan, I don't know if you work remotely, but Parul, you mentioned that you pretty much work remotely all the time. So I was wondering how you set them boundaries working remotely, and also how you make the time and space to build relationships with your co-workers. Because I work in the office kind of most of the time, just because I enjoy being around other people. But we get to have a lot of them kind of water cooler chats. Like, I can't imagine if we were working fully remotely that I would ever kind of talk to someone on Slack about my mental health. But in the office, it's like a bit of chat.
If I'm honest, I don't feel the need to talk too much to my colleagues unless it's something that is like my teammates. Unless it's something that's, you know, affecting me like quite a lot, you know, I'll just message them and say, I'm having a bit of an anxious day, can we like move this meeting? I do talk to my manager quite a lot about it. So I already mentioned her like before, like she's literally the most supportive person in like the world after like my mom. Like, it's amazing. I feel like I've been able to be really open like from the beginning. So when I write my notes for like my one-to-ones in Lattice, I put stuff about like my mental health updates and like my sleep and stuff like that. And I think because she responds so like positively to it and like really supportive, I think it's quite easy for me to do in that one-to-one. And then if I need to do it over a message, then that's fine. I think if it's something that you feel like is like affecting you, like you want support with to do with work, then I think it's definitely worth speaking about. But I think the man, I don't know. I mean, you might have different opinions. I think the manager or like, you know, your HR like person, you know, for getting support and stuff is probably the main person to be able to like talk about that. So yeah, I get what you mean. Like, it is difficult. I'd probably talk more in like one-to-one chats than the team setting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And in the kind of role that you have, it's obviously you work quite independently as well. So you don't need them people to bounce off. It's not like I'm the go-between kind of between sales and customer success and that kind of stuff. But what about you, Dan? Do you work remotely? Are you in the office kind of most of the time?
I'm a bit of both. I'm in the office an average of 1 day a week, usually, maybe 2. This week I'm in Wednesday, Thursday. Last week I was in just Tuesday. A couple of weeks before that I wasn't in at all. I actually, before the pandemic, I used to work 1 day a week at home. And I actually found that my tolerance for being around boisterous people in an office is actually quite low these days. So after about a day, it starts to get a bit overwhelming, and I start thinking to myself, I just want to go to a coffee shop and do my meetings from there. This is too much. There's people around, they're making small talk. So but it's kind of difficult because the role I do, there's very little that I do autonomously because I lead the team and I'm a member of a couple of leadership groups. There's very little that I actually do on my own. Maybe there's writing the occasional document or thinking of a strategy or that kind of thing. But in terms of moving the needle on stuff, it's always with other people. And so I've had to build those relationships. I think we've all become a lot more accustomed to remote over the past few years. So I think the mantras that used to be, not having difficult conversations over video and not giving people bad feedback over video and all that have kind of gone because we've had to for 2 years. So I think it is possible to have even the tough conversations and build working relationships. I mean, in my new job, I've been there 9 months. There's still quite a few colleagues I've never met, and some I probably never will. And for me, it's important not to give any advantage to those people who do happen to be in the office. So it's important for me to build the relationship with the people that aren't in the office just as much as the ones that are. But I do find myself, I'm never in the office more than 2 days. There was about a month ago, I was in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 1 week. And by the Thursday, there's no other way to put it, but I was getting quite tetchy and quite grumpy and just thought, I'm just going to hide in a meeting room effectively as if I'm working from home. I'm cocooned in here. I'm just going to do my stuff and then I'm going to go home. Because I think that's changed for me. I think through the pandemic, the lack of being around people has lowered my tolerance for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's being in the office is a completely different dynamic to working remotely. I think personally, I love working remotely when I need to. So when it's like writing content or something and I kind of need that space, but it can definitely be distracting the office. And especially if it's like an open plan office, you have them big personalities. It can be, you can have very meaningful conversations, of course you can, but it can also be very distracting from what you actually need to get done that day. So I think the flexibility, and as we mentioned earlier about anxiety and things like that, like having the flexibility for people to just be able to work how they want and when they want, I think is something that all companies kind of need to adopt, because otherwise they're going to lose good people for those reasons. If they're strict on you have to be in the office 2 days a week, and those 2 days cause you intense anxiety and you're unproductive and you don't enjoy it, then that will affect everything. That'll affect your work life, your personal life, everything. So being able to say, yeah, you can work however you want, whenever you work, whether that's sending emails at 5 a.m. or 5 o'clock at night and clocking off, like that's absolutely okay with us. We just need, and that's, I think, how companies need to approach things and able to attract and also retain the best people, because it's not one size fits all anymore. We're all growing as a human race. We're all more talking more openly about these things and really realizing that everyone is different and have completely different needs.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, I'm sorry, I'm going to mention the D word. I'm going to talk about the Daily Mail. I'm really sorry. I'm going to say it very briefly and then move past. There was a story I saw in the Daily Mail about builders, and it was basically mocking builders, saying, oh, they're all woke now because it shows that 70% of builders will talk about their feelings and they're not having English breakfasts anymore, and they're telling each other how they feel. And it was really, basically, it was saying they're becoming less manly, was what it was. I mean, so many things to unpick in how toxic that is. But
that's disgusting.
But it's the Daily Mail. It's no surprise, is it?
Well, yeah.
And there's a very interesting, there's a great book called The Descent of Man by Grayson Perry, which I highly recommend. And he in there spent a lot of time going to motorbike rallies and, car shows and places where you traditionally would get a lot of men hanging out talking. And he said that actually, when you listen to the conversations that are going on, the men are actually sharing feelings. They're just doing it in this kind of coded way. You know, they won't say to each other, "How's your mental health?" They say, "How's the renovation of that car be going?" And he's like, "Oh, well, I've been having other stuff going on, so I haven't had time to do that." And I just found it very interesting. But there's still this stigma around, you know, some people are still perceived as weak for not having perfect mental health. And frankly, nobody has perfect mental health.
Yeah.
And you only have to look at people in the public eye. If anybody
Yeah.
ever cancels a performance because they're suffering with anxiety, you go
Yeah.
below the line to the comments, and it's just full of people saying, you know, with how much you're getting paid for this concert, how dare you not perform for this reason, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That's that. Honestly, it's because they like you said, if somebody's like broken the leg and they can't dance around on the stage like while they're singing, then like it's fine. And things like mental health doesn't go away when you've got like more money and like your life looks like really, really good. Like social media always paints like one picture. I think one thing that like, I mean, don't get me wrong, like I'm a LinkedIn and Twitter fanatic. Bloody love them. But sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I've done it now.
It's too late now, yeah.
It's too late. We're on at some of the causes. But like, so I love those. I love those platforms. I think it's a great space for me. You know what I mean? Because I think we're just all really open. And LinkedIn, obviously, I'm working talent acquisition. Got to use it. One thing that I just started using less was Instagram because I still use it to post a story or a post like now and then. But honestly, I used to be on that platform 24/7, and I always compared myself to like other people's lives. Like, you know, where they're going on holiday, where they're going with this. And just realized like honestly, like none of it was like real. So to me, a form of like self-care was just cutting that out. I found myself like scrolling through my stories and looking what my friends are doing all the time. Like it's a very unhealthy obsession.
It is. I think one thing you said in there that I think I completely agree with is this idea that privilege doesn't make mental health better. You know, people, it's like with Robin Williams, people are like, what does he have to be depressed about? Which, you know, kind of one of the sentences. But on the flip side, I acknowledge my privilege in the fact that if I'm feeling so low or so anxious that I can't function, I've still got food in the house. I've still got a nice house to be in. I'm still going to get paid. And so I think you know, with mental health especially, I think there are still some people, you know, with less disposable income who might not have the space or time to do what they need to actually improve their mental health because they can't afford to take a week off work or whatever. And I think that's a, you know, that's a horrible situation. It shouldn't be. How much money you've got shouldn't impact how much self-care you can take.
Yeah. I mean that's I think that's huge as well. It's like financial insecurity for people as well. Because like I think now I can pretty like confidently say that like I work with a really, really supportive employer. But like let's say like hypothetically speaking, like I didn't. And I'm struggling with like my mental health and I need to take like time off and stuff. Like I'm not worried that this is gonna impact me negatively. So let's say like they're not a very nice employer, which they are. But let's say then my job is at risk and then I essentially get like constructive dismissal. So they push me out without pushing me out because of like mental health like issues. Like I know if that happened, I could probably walk into another job very easily. I've got plenty of savings. I've got like parents that will like help me out. Most people don't have that, and financial insecurity is a massive contributing factor. And we're like in the midst of one of the worst cost of living crises that like we've seen since like the 2008 recession. So like this is only going to get worse and worse. I don't know what my point was there. Like I'm really angry about it.
Yeah, it's something that's affecting so many people across the UK, and people who are struggling to find that help and support. I think it's only going to get worse. I mean, it's great that obviously we're having this conversation here today. We're all from privileged backgrounds. We're in a privileged position, sorry, and I think that there are so many people out there that they can't just start going to therapy. Their employer doesn't offer it, and they are terrified of taking that time off work. It is so expensive, and I don't think. I mean, certainly in the UK at the moment, the mental health support that you get is awful. When I went through my crisis last September, they said it was a waiting list of 10 months to even speak to anyone. And then I spoke to
and you're like, I'm in crisis now.
I know.
Like, I can't wait 10 months.
I know. I was literally like, I've literally been referred by the crisis management team. Like, I need help, and they were like, well, it's 10 months for you to even speak to someone on the phone. Like, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, I remember when I spoke to GP, and then I met somebody for a initial assessment thing at the surgery, and she said to me, she said, off the record, if you could afford it, go private, because she said the NHS will not. You'll be waiting 6 months, I think it was, for your first appointment, and then you'll get 10 sessions, and then there'll be a committee which decides whether you deserve any more sessions. And she said it's always going to be hanging over you that you might just stop. Whereas, I was seeing a therapist before the thing at work, but I'm in that privileged position that I could afford to carry on therapy for as long as I needed. But yes, I mean, the thing at work, the benefit of having the free therapy is amazing, but it would be great if companies offered that to people who weren't in the kind of professions where they could afford it anyway. And I know that sounds, I'm very grateful for it, and not everybody that works for the same company as I do is on a salary where they could afford it. But where is that for the factory workers and the cleaners and the minimum wage workers?
Yeah, I think paying people enough money to have the financial security, and also to pay for therapy like themselves, like if they need it. But yeah, having it as a benefit. There's a really, really good report that Deloitte did on UK mental health and employers. So if anybody wants to like check it out, if you just put like Deloitte mental health and employers study or something, it'll come up. It's like a massive PDF, like 60 pages, but some really, really good research on there. And they did a deep dive into financial well-being. And I mean, this study was from a few years ago as well, so you can imagine how much worse the figures are now. So 26% of people studied said that they do not feel like they earn enough to maintain a decent standard of living. 19% had trouble making ends due to income volatility. And after the financial crisis in 2008, the percentage of unsecured debt as a share of household income was actually it was 27.5% after the financial crisis. In 2018, it was 30.4%. So it's gone up by almost 3% during that time. And there was another one which found that 90% of younger workers thought that their mental health was affected by the cost of living. And again, this was 4 years ago. So the younger generations everybody's suffering, but I think the younger generations are really taking a hit here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've over the past 5-10 years, there's been a huge push society-wide to be open around things about mental health, and I think now it's just coming to fruition how difficult it is to be open about mental health. Like, you can be open, but the support isn't there. There's one thing trying to find support, but it's whether that support is actually there for you. And I mean, obviously this is not for this conversation, we can't set the world to right here right now, but these things need to become more accessible to anyone who needs it. There should be a mental health nurse at schools and things like that. There should be those things that encourage people from a young age to talk about it, rather than waiting till they're later in their years and they've thought oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been struggling with this my whole life and now I'm learning so much about me. It's just about introducing things younger and just making things more accessible. But I guess that's if we had unlimited money as a country, then I mean that's what I'd spend it on.
Yeah, I think the one thing I've seen with quite a few of my friends who've got kids and stuff is a change from when I was a kid. In that, if I was, what would be called sad as a kid, I was told to cheer up. Whereas actually now, I'm finding that, some of my friends' kids' schools do actually have mental health professionals as part of the staff, and kids are encouraged to, it's okay to feel sad, and they're kind of helped to understand that if you feel sad today, you might not feel sad tomorrow, but it's okay to understand why you feel sad, and there's nothing shameful about not feeling happy. And I realize that's very kind of infantile language, but that's kind of deliberate, because I think, as a kid, maybe you don't have you haven't got to the point where you're going to understand the full spectrum of mental health. But just saying, actually, if you're not feeling great today, that's fine. That's fine. That's normal. And let's talk about that.
And I think that's just been like the main takeaway from this kind of whole conversation. Like, whether you're 3 years old or whether you're 80 years old, if you're feeling sad, it's okay to take a day. It's okay to take a week. It's okay to take however you want. Like, no matter what the circumstances are, no questions asked. That's how everyone should kind of look at it. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what I loved earlier was the power of the word no. And I remember hearing on a podcast that Sarah Millican has a necklace which just has the word no written on it, and she just wears this necklace, and I love it. But actually, amongst my friends, we've now reached an understanding where if I, message one of my best friends and say, "Do you want to go to this thing?" they might just say no, and nobody's offended. Nobody's like, "Oh, go on, you want to." It's like, okay, fine. The next thing I invite you to, you might want to do. But also in return, when you invite me to something, I could just go, "No, I don't fancy that," or "No, I'm not really feeling up to that." And it's kind of, it's what you were saying earlier. It's about undoing this need to please people, because you can be a good friend even by sometimes saying no.
Do you know what? I think that's a really good position to be in. But I remember a few years ago, I had got my depression diagnosis. I'm still unsure whether it was that, but I had just started on antidepressants. I was really, really struggling anyway. And if anybody started on antidepressants, you know how much that first couple of weeks just absolutely floors you. I couldn't even get through the workday. I was falling asleep in the afternoon. My friends wanted to go out and do something. And I was like, do you know what? I don't know if I'm feeling up to this. I think it was for St. Paddy's Day. And then one of them just absolutely kicked off at me. I haven't actually spoke to him that much since, and I bumped into him at our mutual friends. And he just basically said that he'd held a grudge against me all this time just because of that, because he just thought I was making excuses. And I was like, are you all right, hon? And yeah, just safe to say, we're not friends again. Because honestly, to me, if somebody's I could cancel something which is really important with one of my really good friends now, and they would completely understand that. So I think to have held that against me for all these years for something like that small, I think it is honestly, it's childish. So yeah,
says more about them than it does about you, in my mind. And
very weird, isn't it?
It is, but people are strange, and I've kind of come to the point now where if I don't enjoy spending time with somebody or talking to somebody, I just don't. And I know that sounds quite and that applies equally to family as friends, and I know that sounds harsh, but just because I happen to be, I'm not going to say a relation, because if anybody hears this, they'll think I'm talking about them. But just because I happen to be related to somebody in some way, it's like, well, maybe we've got nothing in common, and I don't really like you very much. So, I'll see you at family events and say hello, but no, I don't really want to go for coffee if you're down in London. I don't.
Absolutely, it's like your time is precious, and life is too. My mum always used to say this to me: life's too short to do things you don't want to do. So
Love
if you don't want
that.
to, if you don't want to
Yeah.
do something, just don't do it. Whether that's going out for drinks with your friends, whether it's doing the ironing today or tomorrow. If you don't want to do it, just don't do it.
Self-care is not selfish. Self-care is not selfish. Absolutely not.
What I've discovered in recent years, which I know loads of people say this is quite sad, but I've discovered this is brilliant, is WhatsApp groups for watching along with TV shows. So we do it for Strictly, we do it for RuPaul's Drag Race, we do it for Bake Off, we do it for The Masked Singer, and it's just people who can't, for whatever reason, or live a long way apart, and it feels a bit like you're watching it as a group because you make the sarcastic comments you're in, going, "Oh, did you see that? Oh, did you see this?" And it really connects people. We started during the pandemic, but like our Strictly group, we now sometimes have like 20 people online watching the Strictly family going, "Oh, did you see that? Oh, that score was a bit low." And it brings people together because we never all get together every Saturday for the
That is
autumn.
so nice.
What a lovely
I
idea.
highly recommend it. Having WhatsApp groups around your favourite shows, and then just, sometimes if two of you are together in the same room, you can still be on there and other people. It's utterly brilliant. I really recommend it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna give that a go. If you got one for like Love Island, like put me in there.
Sorry, no.
Just...
I also couldn't do that because
lovely.
I watch things at such random times. Like, what if someone gives me a spoiler or something?
Oh, we have rules. We have rules on things that are streamed rather than shown on broadcast TV. We have rules about how far afterwards you're allowed to say, "I liked the winner" or "I agreed with the result," but you're not allowed to give stuff away until
everyone's watched it.
Yeah, I think it's like 50% of the group of people I've said I've watched will then send the message to go, "Right, if you haven't watched, you now need to mute the group and it's your responsibility."
Sounds so organised. I love it.
Oh yeah, we have rules and everything. We have rules about you're not allowed to criticize anybody. You're allowed to be sarcastic and you're allowed to be satirical and you're allowed to kind of, gently take the piss out of, oh, somebody's dress is a bit strange or whatever. But you're not allowed to criticize somebody's personality. You're not allowed to body shame anybody. You're not allowed to do anything like that. So they're all kind of like really safe, fun spaces where it's just kind of a nice way to spend a couple of hours of a Saturday.
That's really nice. One takeaway I've had from this conversation, it's going to be setting up WhatsApp groups with all my friends and with all my shows.
Just on that as well, I think there can be like a little bit too much on like WhatsApp groups. Like I have so much going on, like literally like LinkedIn, Twitter, WhatsApp, Telegram and stuff. And I used to take it upon myself to spend an hour every day after dinner on my laptop, making sure that I've gotten back to any messages that I've forgotten to get back to across like the platforms. Obviously some of it work related and some of it not. And honestly, it was a drain on like my time. So I feel a bit guilty sometimes, but like if I just don't think I can help somebody, I can't reply to everyone. So I think just having a period where you just like, obviously if somebody like family messages you like one to one, like reply. But if you get messages from like strangers on like the internet, it's harsh, but like you don't owe anybody anything.
Oh no, and so the WhatsApp groups I have tend to be so focused around a thing that my other half, he's in the WhatsApp groups but doesn't tend to join in very much. And he'll look at his phone at the end of Strictly and go, "I've got 400 unread messages." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that'll be the WhatsApp group for Strictly." But during the week, it tends to be very quiet. If there's a big news story relating to that or somebody sees something interesting, they'll post a picture. But they're not very chatty in between. It tends to be, the end of one episode, we'll all say, "Right, see you same time next week." And then we all go quiet. And then 5 minutes before Strictly of a Saturday, we're like, "Oh, hello, good evening. How was your week?" That kind of thing. So we're quite good. I don't tend to have social WhatsApp groups, if that makes sense. So a group of friends who share stuff, they tend to be focused around an event or a thing instead. Because I found whenever you have a social WhatsApp group or something, there's always somebody who posts something they think is funny and is actually quite offensive. And whoever it is, you'll then get into that. And it's like, "Oh, no, can't be doing with that."
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely. I think it can. I definitely suffer from that as well, Parul. Like the whole feeling guilty for not replying to people. Like sometimes it'll be like a week or so, and I just think I don't have the mental capacity right now to reply to you. Like I will come back to you
Yeah.
when I can. But I think it's about surrounding yourself with people that know and understand that. Like if anything's
Yeah.
wrong, I'll tell them that something's wrong. But if not, I'll
Yeah.
just reply as and when I can and
It's more
want
like
to.
strangers, though. It's more like strangers who obviously like. I don't mind, like people like message, like give me like a nudge and stuff. But sometimes I'm just not gonna have the capacity, and what sometimes people don't realize is that I have to post on social media platforms like for my job, but like I have a backlog of messages. It's not just you that I'm gonna get like I need to get back to, but I'd literally have to just get back to like all of them, and I just can't sometimes. Like I'm a human, and like I just need like time away. Like spending all this time outside of work, like it's not paid time. I'm sitting after my dinner just like replying to people. This is like, well, it's on LinkedIn, but I'm talking like non-work related stuff, if that makes sense. So it is almost like having a second job.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
it sounds like you need a PA.
I literally, oh my God, I need a PA. Does anybody know where I can get one? 'Cause life's happening.
I've only recently stopped replying to everything because if you have head of development or head of engineering in your job title, you get so many people messaging you every day. And I usually do one reply, which is a thank you for the message, but this isn't of interest to me, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then if people carry on with but could we still have an exploratory call tomorrow? I'm like,
Yeah.
right, no, I've
Are you
done the
talking
polite
about
thing.
recruiters?
No, well, no. Recruiters tend the way it always goes with recruiters. I can tell you the conversation is they'll say, "I see you're quote hiring for next. Can we help?" And I'll respond to say, "No, we don't use
No.
agencies for roles. We have an internal team. But thanks for the message." And then the
Yeah.
recruiter will come back and say, either, "What do you do when you're struggling with roles, or are you struggling with any roles currently?"
Yeah.
Or sometimes it goes straight to, "Okay, but please bear me in mind if you ever do go out to agencies." And
Yeah.
that's always the script it always goes through. But to be honest, I don't object. I mean, all of the recruiter relationships I had started with somebody messaging me for the first time, and you can't
Yeah.
hate somebody for doing their job.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Of course.
if they start to get a bit, kind of, oh well, could I send you some? I was like, no, I've politely said no. It's
Yeah.
not going to go anywhere. It's not. It's no longer a good use of either your time or mine for you to carry on
Mm.
trying. I understand you're trying to do biz dev and you've got to do that as part of the role. I get that, but now go and do it somewhere else. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that comes back to Parul earlier saying you don't owe anyone anything. And I know if you're getting so many messages, it probably feels somewhat rude to ignore them, but it's just part of life, essentially.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
For
I'm
sure.
conscious of time. I don't want to keep
Yeah.
you folks any longer. We could sit and set the world to rights this evening. I think we should all run for Prime Minister and
Oh,
sort
Yeah.
let's
out the
not.
mental health crisis.
We're not going to talk about politics, are we? We're not.
Oh no. Don't worry.
Might be one for another day.
Yes, that's the whole conversation in itself. But yes, thank
Do
you
you know?
both for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you
Cool. It's been
so much.
fun.
Yeah, it's been fun. You're an amazing host, and
Oh, thank
look
you very
forward
much.
to the next one. Yeah. Have a
Yes,
great evening,
definitely.
everyone. And also, like, if anybody wants to like reach out, my DMs are open. Not a
Yeah.
therapist, but like, if there's anything I can help with, give me a shout.
That's very kind of you to offer.
Yeah. Well, obviously, don't be put off by like what I said before. Like when I have capacity, I can get back to people. It's like when people like chase me up after like 4 hours. I'm like, yeah, I will do. So yeah, talk to me and I will. Yeah, just give me like a couple of days. But yeah, have a nice evening, everyone.
Yeah. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.